Rome believed in fate. Augurs read it in the flight of birds. Priests read it in the entrails of sacrificed animals. Senators consulted oracles before declaring war, before crossing rivers, before making love. The Roman world was soaked in the conviction that the future was already written somewhere. And the wise man's job was simply to read the signs correctly. Then came a man who treated fate less like a sentence and more like an opponent. Gaius Julius Caesar didn't wait to find out what destiny had planned for him. He decided to write it himself and dared the universe to disagree. And the only question that remains, once you really let that land, is what you're going to do with it. Destiny had a script ready for Caesar before he was old enough to understand it. Born into a patrician family that had fallen on hard times, with connections to the populist faction that the dictator Sulla despised, young Caesar was handed a fate that should have ended his story almost before it began. Sulla, after seizing power in Rome, demanded that Caesar divorce his wife, a political enemy's daughter. Caesar refused. Sulla's prescription lists were already claiming the lives of men who'd done far less. The expected outcome was simple. Caesar dies young, a footnote in someone else's history. Instead, he went into hiding, was eventually pardoned through the pleading of relatives, and reportedly walked away from the encounter to a warning from Sulla himself that in this stubborn young man lurked many a Marius, referring to Sulla's great rival. Destiny had written him out of the story. Caesar simply declined to leave the stage. By 49 BCE, Caesar stood at the edge of a small river in northern Italy, the Rubicon, and faced the closest thing the ancient world had to a cosmic red line. Roman law was unambiguous. A general was forbidden from bringing his army across that river into Italy proper. To do so was to declare war on the Republic itself. Every signal, legal, religious, political, pointed toward catastrophe. The Senate had stripped him of command. His rival Pompey held the legions of Rome behind him. The destined outcome, the one written into the structure of Roman law and tradition, was that Caesar would disband his army, return to Rome as a private citizen, and likely face prosecution and ruin at the hands of his enemies. He crossed anyway. "The die is cast," he is said to have remarked, not as a man surrendering to fate, but as a man who had just finished rolling his own dice and intended to play out whatever came next on his own terms. This is the recurring pattern in Caesar's life. When destiny offered him a closing door, he didn't knock politely and wait. He found the hinge and removed it. What's remarkable about Caesar isn't simply that he won. Plenty of ancient figures won. It's that he kept making bets that, on paper, he had no right to make, and somehow, again and again, came out ahead. In Gaul, he fought campaigns against numerically superior forces, building fortifications that surrounded his own surrounding forces. At Alesia, his men built a ring of siege works, facing inward toward the besieged Gallic stronghold, and a second ring facing outward against a massive relief army, fighting on two fronts simultaneously, with what should have been impossible odds. He won. In the civil war against Pompey, he crossed the Adriatic in winter, a season when no sane commander moved an army by sea, specifically because no one expected it. He arrived in Egypt during a succession crisis and walked straight into the middle of it, emerging not just alive, but allied with Cleopatra and in control of the situation. Each time, the destined outcome, the rational, probability-weighted, sensible prediction, said Caesar should have lost. Each time, he treated the prediction as a challenge rather than a verdict. Here's where the story gets complicated, and where Caesar's relationship with fate becomes genuinely philosophical rather than simply triumphant. Because destiny eventually won. The soothsayer's warning, "Beware the Ides of March," has become one of history's most famous instances of prophecy ignored. Caesar reportedly saw the man on his way to the Senate that day and joked that the Ides had come. The soothsayer's reply has echoed for 2,000 years. Aye, they are come, but not gone. Within hours, Caesar was dead, stabbed 23 times by men who included his own allies, in the very chamber built to house the Republic's deliberations, beneath a statue of his former rival, Pompey. If this were a simple story about a man who defeated fate, it would end with Caesar dying peacefully decades later, having outmaneuvered destiny one final time. It doesn't, and that's exactly what makes the story worth examining rather than just admiring. Here's the thing most retellings miss. Caesar's triumph over destiny was never about escaping death. No one escapes that. Every culture that has ever produced a hero has eventually had to write the scene where the hero dies, because mortality is the one contract none of us get out of. Caesar's actual victory was different and more interesting. He refused to let destiny dictate the terms of the story while he was alive to influence it. The structures around him, Roman law, senatorial tradition, the expectations of his class, the probability tables that any reasonable observer would have drawn up, all said the same things at multiple points in his life. You will lose here. You will be punished here. You cannot win this one. And Caesar's response consistently was not denial that these forces existed. He understood Roman law better than almost anyone of his generation. He wasn't naive about risk. His response was a refusal to treat probability as destiny. He distinguished in practice, if not in explicit philosophy, between what was likely and what was certain. Destiny, as the Romans understood it, claimed certainty. The gods had decided. The omens revealed it. The outcome was fixed. Caesar's entire career is an argument against that certainty, not against risk, not against danger, against the idea that the future is already settled and all that remains is to discover what it holds. Even in his final hours, there's a strange echo of this pattern. Ancient sources claim Caesar had been warned repeatedly in the days before his death. His wife Calpurnia reportedly had nightmares and begged him not to go to the Senate that day. Friends advised caution. The warnings were not subtle. He went anyway. This is the part that troubles a purely triumphant reading of his life, and it should. Going to the Senate that day wasn't another instance of Caesar bending fate to his will. It looks from the outside like exactly the kind of overconfidence that finally caught up with him. And maybe it was. But there's another way to read it, one that fits the pattern of his entire life rather than breaking from it. Caesar had spent decades refusing to let fear of an uncertain future control his present actions. To suddenly reverse that pattern, to stay home, suspicious of shadows, ruled by warnings and omens, would have been a betrayal of the very philosophy that had built his entire career. He had outplayed destiny by refusing to be governed by the fear of it. On his last day, that refusal cost him his life. On every other day for decades before it, that same refusal had built an empire. We tend to imagine that beating fate would look like escaping it entirely, living forever, winning every battle, dying of old age surrounded by grandchildren after a life of uninterrupted triumph. Caesar's story suggests something more honest and frankly more useful. Outplaying destiny doesn't mean defeating death. It means refusing to let the fear of an undetermined future paralyze the decisions of the present. The augurs of Rome believed the future was a fixed text waiting to be read. Caesar behaved as though the future was an open negotiation, heavily influenced by forces outside his control. Yes, dangerous and uncertain, yes, but never so fixed that the right action at the right moment couldn't change its shape entirely. He crossed rivers he wasn't supposed to cross. He fought battles he wasn't supposed to win. He forgave enemies he wasn't supposed to forgive, which arguably did more to seal his fate than any battlefield risk. His famous clemency toward defeated rivals like Brutus and Cassius meant the very men who killed him were men he'd chosen deliberately to spare. That's perhaps the deepest irony of the whole story. The destiny that finally caught up with Caesar was assembled, in part, out of his own refusal to let destiny, in the form of an enemy must be destroyed, dictate his actions towards the people who would eventually kill him. He wrote his own story almost to the very last page, and even the ending, when it came on terms shaped by decisions he had made, choices he had owned, a character he had built deliberately across decades, rather than one fate had simply assigned him. You don't need to conquer Gaul or cross a river into civil war to take something from this. The structures around your own life, the statistics, the expectations, the people like you usually end up like this. Predictions that family, culture, and circumstance hand you function the same way the Roman omens functioned for Caesar's contemporaries. They feel like certainty. They're usually just probability dressed up in the costume of fate. Caesar's life is an argument for treating the difference seriously, not recklessly. He was, by every account, an exceptionally careful planner, calculating odds with more precision than most of his rivals. But planning is not the same as submission.